Staff Sergeant Maya, Sean stood at the back of the briefing room, while Lieutenant Vickers traced his finger across the compound diagram projected on the screen. The tactical operations center smelled of stale coffee and the particular tension that preceded every mission, though Vickers seemed to treat this one as routine. "Keep the ridge warm, Chun," Vickers said without turning from the screen. "Babysitter duty." His casual dismissal drew quiet laughter from the 12-man assault squad, filling the folding chairs. "The real operators will handle everything down here." Chen's expression didn't change as she studied the satellite imagery over Vickers' shoulder. 17 visible firing positions marked the compound's perimeter, their overlapping fields of fire creating 3 distinct kill zones that Vickers hadn't mentioned in his 15-minute brief. The eastern approach showed a drainage culvert large enough to conceal a fire team, unmarked on his hastily prepared tactical overlay. Sergeant Caldwell shifted in his seat near the front, his scarred hands folded across the rifle resting on his lap. "We're insurance they don't need," he added, his voice carrying the authority of 6 combat deployments. "Guardian Angel stuff." His 3 team leaders nodded their agreement. The synchronization of experienced soldiers who'd worked together long enough to communicate without words. Chun moved to the equipment bay without responding, her hands already performing the ritual check of her M110 semi-automatic sniper system. The weapon's familiar weight settled against her shoulder as she verified the Schmidt and Bender Scopes 0, her muscle memory cataloging each specification. 782 meters from Ridge 347 to the compound's eastern wall, she calculated, accounting for the 12-degree elevation difference and tonight's forecasted crosswind. The mental trigonometry required no conscious effort. "Where's everyone from, by the way?" Private Mendez asked as the squad filtered into the equipment bay, his nervous energy typical of soldiers facing their 3rd deployment. Chun caught fragments of answers. Texas drawled against New York's sharp consonants, while she threaded her rifle sling through its attachment points. The casual geography lesson meant nothing to the mission, though she noted Mendez's hands trembled slightly as he checked his ammunition pouches. The Chinook's interior vibrated with rotor wash as they lifted from the forward operating base, red cabin lights casting everyone in crimson shadow. "Our guardian angels probably never fired a shot in anger," someone muttered over the intercom, the comment drawing more laughter that Chun heard through her headset. She pressed her face against the porthole glass, studying terrain features through her night vision goggles. The ridgeline emerged from darkness in shades of green, its rocky spine offering perfect defilade from compound observation. Ridge 347 rose like a ship's prow above the valley floor, its western slope providing covered approach while the eastern face dropped away in a cliff that would prevent hostile flanking. Chun established her position among the rocks, the M110's bipod legs settling into natural divots that steadied her aim. Her range finder confirmed 782 meters to the compound's eastern wall, exactly as calculated. The night air carried the distant generator hum from the target building. Through her scope, the compound resolved into sharp detail. 17 firing positions, she whispered into her radio, verifying her earlier count from the satellite imagery. 3 on the roof, 6 in ground floor windows, 8 more distributed along the perimeter wall. The fields of fire overlapped with professional precision, creating interlocking kill zones that would shred any assault force lacking careful coordination. "Copy that," Vickers replied, his tone suggesting he'd barely listened. "All elements stand by for my signal." The radio net fell silent as Caldwell's squad moved into assault positions, 12 shadows flowing through darkness toward the compound's perimeter. Chen's breathing slowed to the pattern she'd learned on competition ranges years before combat ever became real. The scope's reticle tracked across window frames and roofline positions, her mind automatically calculating windage adjustments and holdover values for each potential target. A thermal signature flickered in the drainage culvert she'd identified during the briefing. Then another, 3 distinct heat sources concealed exactly where Vickers' plan positioned Caldwell's approach route. Her finger moved to the radio transmit button as Caldwell's team stacked against the compound door, their entry imminent. "Dragon 6, this is Overwatch," she said, using Vickers' call sign. "Thermal contacts in culvert grid November 7, directly along your approach vector. 3 signatures. Advise caution." Static answered her for 2 seconds before the explosion transformed night into white-hot brilliance. The IED's blast wave rippled across the valley floor, its orange fireball silhouetting Caldwell's squad against the compound wall. Private Mendez's scream cut through the radio chatter, raw and animal, the sound of man discovering what shrapnel felt like when it shredded through Kevlar and flesh. Chen watched through her scope as Caldwell lunged toward the writhing figure, his movements instinctive even as the ambush erupted from every shadow. Muzzle flashes ignited across the compound like a string of firecrackers. 17 positions Chun had cataloged, now pouring automatic fire into the kill zone, where Caldwell's team scattered for non-existent cover. The machine gun nest she'd marked on the roof stitched tracers across the open ground, each green streak seeking flesh. An RPG streaked from a second-story window, its rocket motor painting a smoke trail before the warhead impacted the Humvee positioned as their extraction vehicle. The explosion flipped 2 tons of armored truck onto its side, flames consuming the cabin. "Exfil now," Vickers shouted into the radio net, his voice cracking at the edges. "All elements withdraw to Rally Point Charlie. Abort mission. Abort." His panic transmitted across the frequency like a contagion, Chun hearing the fundamental collapse of command authority in real time. Through her scope, Chun counted muzzle flashes with mechanical precision. 14 active shooters, her mind cataloging each position with the same detail she'd applied to the pre-mission satellite imagery. The PCAM machine gunner on the roof, 2 RPG teams reloading in separate windows, a sniper in the water tower 60 meters behind the main compound, riflemen firing from doorways and window frames. Caldwell's squad had 0 cover except the burning Humvee, its black smoke offering concealment, but no protection from the steel hornets buzzing through the air. Mendez lay in the open, his body convulsing as blood pooled beneath him, too exposed for anyone to reach without dying. Caldwell crawled toward him anyway, his face set in the expression of a man who'd already written off his own survival. The machine gun tracked toward their movement, barrels swinging in an arc that would cut both men in half within 3 seconds. Chen's mind processed the tactical geometry with the cold clarity that competition shooting had burned into her nervous system. 782 meters to the roof gunner, 11-degree upward angle, 6-knot crosswind from the northwest requiring 1.3 mil holdover. Her breathing stopped at the natural pause between heartbeats, the M110's reticle settling on the gunner's throat just above his ceramic plate carrier. The rifle's report cracked across the valley as her finger completed its smooth press. The weapon's recoiled, driving back against her shoulder an instant before the 7.62mm round completed its flight. Through the scope, she watched the gunner's head snap backward, his hands releasing the PCAM's grips as he toppled from the roofline. The machine gun fell silent, its barrel pointing uselessly at the stars. Caldwell froze mid-crawl, his head turning toward the ridgeline 800 meters away, where Chen's muzzle flash had briefly illuminated her position. The RPG team in the western window swung their launcher toward the squad's position, the gunner settling the weapon against his shoulder for a shot that would finish what the machine gun had started. Chen's second round punched through the RPG gunner's chest before his finger reached the trigger, the massive rifle round's hydrostatic shock dropping him instantly. Her third shot took his loader in the skull as the man turned to flee, both bodies crumpling in the window frame. 2 shots, 1.4 seconds, the mechanical rhythm of competition shooting translated into combat mathematics. The compound's return fire diminished by half as hostile shooters recognized a new threat, their tactical focus splitting between the pinned squad and the invisible sniper who just killed 3 men in under 10 seconds. Chun used their confusion to engage the sniper in the water tower, her round penetrating the metal tank wall and the man hiding behind it. The tower's stored water began fountaining through the bullet hole, a geyser visible even in darkness. Incoming fire slackened enough for Caldwell to complete his desperate crawl, his hands hooking under Mendez's plate carrier to drag the wounded private toward the overturned Humvee. Chun shifted her aim to a rifleman who'd leaned from a doorway to target Caldwell's movement, dropping him with a shot through the pelvis that folded him in half. Another shooter materialized on the roof where the machine gunner had fallen, attempting to reclaim the PKM, but Chin's round found him before his hands touched the weapon. Dragon 6, this is Overwatch, Chun transmitted, her voice steady despite the adrenaline now flooding her system. Engaging targets of opportunity. Recommend you consolidate position behind destroyed vehicle. She didn't wait for Vickers to acknowledge, her scope already tracking toward the next muzzle flash. A fighter emerged from a doorway, dragging a replacement RPG, his movements quick with combat experience. Chun led his motion by 2 feet, her round intercepting him mid-stride and spinning his body like a top before he collapsed. The RPG clattered across pavement, unfired. She counted 9 confirmed kills in 45 seconds, her brain maintaining the tally automatically while her hands worked the rifle's controls. The squad reached the Humvee's cover as Chun methodically cleared positions along the eastern wall. A shooter behind concrete blocks, eliminated when he exposed his shoulder during a magazine change. 2 fighters attempting to advance on the squad's flank. Both dropped before they completed 3 steps. The compound's muzzle flashes decreased from 14 to 5 as hostile fighters recognized that exposure meant death from an invisible source. Chen's rifle barrel grew hot against her gloved hand, 62 casings now scattered around her position like brass seeds. Through her scope, she watched Caldwell organizing his survivors behind the burning vehicle. The squad finally responding with coordinated return fire now that Chen's intervention had broken the ambush's initial shock. For hostiles remained visible, their fire sporadic and poorly aimed, suppressed by the realization that a precision shooter controlled the battlefield from an elevated position they couldn't effectively engage. Chun selected targets by threat priority, eliminating a fighter who'd achieved a flanking angle on the squad, then another attempting to maneuver closer with a grenade. The battlefield fell into an uneasy equilibrium, Chen's overwatch preventing hostile movement while the squad maintained defensive fire from behind inadequate cover. Mendez's screaming had stopped, whether from morphine or blood loss Chen couldn't determine from 800 meters away. The night air carried the smell of burning rubber and cordite, mixing with the generator hum that had never stopped despite the violence erupting around it. Chun pressed her eye against the scope, watching 3 fighters detach from the compound's southern wall and begin moving through shadows toward the ridgeline. Their tactical spacing suggested training, each man maintaining 15 meters separation as they advanced using available cover. The hostile commander had recognized the sniper threat and dispatched a hunter team to eliminate her position. She maintained fire on the compound while tracking the flanking team's progress through peripheral awareness, her mind calculating angles and distances for both engagements simultaneously. A rifleman appeared in a second-story window, his AK-47 barrel sweeping toward the squad's position. Chen's round caught in the throat before he completed his aim, the body falling backward into the room's darkness. The flanking team reached the ridgeline's base 340 meters downslope, beginning their climb through the rocky terrain. Chun waited until the point man crossed an open stretch of scree, his body briefly silhouetted against the lighter stone. Her shot dropped him mid-stride, the crack of impact audible even at distance. The 2 trailing fighters dove for cover, their advance halted. Caldwell's voice crackled through the radio net, directing his team with renewed confidence. Specialist Torres, suppress that eastern doorway. Mills, shift right and cover the alley approach. His commands synchronized with Chen's fire pattern, the squad learning to exploit the windows of opportunity her precision created. When Chun eliminated a machine gunner attempting to reposition, Caldwell immediately moved 2 men to better cover before hostile fire could adjust. Chen's scope tracked back to the compound where a fighter crouched behind a propane tank cluster, using the explosive cylinders as shield while he fired at the squad. She calculated penetration angles, deciding the risk of detonation was acceptable if it eliminated the threat. Her round punched through the tank's thin metal, missing the fighter but releasing pressurized gas in a white cloud that forced him to abandon his position. He stumbled into the open, disoriented, and Chen's follow-up shot finished what the gas had started. Movement below caught her attention as the two surviving flankers resumed their climb, now only 80 meters from her position. Chun laid the M110 carefully on its bipod and transitioned to her M4 carbine, the lighter weapon better suited for close engagement. Her breathing shifted to the rapid rhythm of close-quarters combat as she moved 10 meters laterally from her firing position, establishing a new angle on the approaching threat. The first flanker crested the ridgeline 30 meters away, his rifle sweeping for targets. Chun fired 3 rounds center mass. The suppressed carbine's report sharp but quiet compared to the M110's thunder. The fighter collapsed without firing a shot. His partner appeared 2 seconds later, alerted by the sound, but Chun had already adjusted her aim. For more rounds, and the threat dissolved. She sprinted back to her original position, dropping prone beside the M110 and resuming her scope scan of the compound in one fluid motion. A spotter in the water tower had replaced the sniper she'd killed earlier, his binoculars glinting in ambient light. Chen's round shattered both lenses and the eyes behind them. The body tumbled from the tower platform, landing with an impact she couldn't hear but could imagine. Vickers's voice interrupted her concentration, demanding a situation report with the shrill insistence of an officer who'd lost control of his operation. Chun ignored the transmission, her attention fixed on a fighter attempting to reach an RPG that lay abandoned in the courtyard. She led his movement by 3 feet, the round intercepting him before his fingers touched the weapon's pistol grip. The compound's return fire had diminished to sporadic bursts from 5 remaining positions, the hostile forces' cohesion shattered by sustained losses they couldn't effectively counter. Chun worked methodically from east to west, eliminating a sniper who'd established position in a drainage pipe, then his spotter who tried to retrieve the fallen rifle. 2 shooters fired from a barricaded doorway, their muzzle flashes synchronized, but Chen's patience outlasted their discipline. When one leaned out to reload, she took him. The second man abandoned his position entirely. Caldwell seized the momentum, directing his squad in a tactical bound toward better cover behind a low wall 20 meters closer to the compound. Chun provided overwatch, her scope tracking across windows and roof lines for any hostile response. A fighter appeared on the roof with another PKM, attempting to reclaim the high ground advantage. Chen's round struck the weapon's receiver, the impact destroying the machine gun and sending fragments into the operator's face. He fell screaming, no longer a threat. The squad reached their new position without casualties. Caldwell's tactical coordination with Chen's fire now operating at the level of practice partnership despite never having trained together. When Chun suppressed the doorway, Caldwell moved elements. When Caldwell directed suppressive fire, Chun used the noise to shift position and engage from a new angle. Specialist Torres took a round through his calf during the movement, his cry of pain cutting through the radio chatter before the medic reached him with a tourniquet. Chun immediately identified the shooter, a rifleman in a 3rd-story window who'd achieved a lucky angle through the squad's defensive gaps. Her return shot transformed luck into the man's final mistake. The hostile fire slackened further as fighters recognized that exposure meant death from multiple angles they couldn't simultaneously defend against. Chun counted 11 confirmed kills now, her ammunition supply dropping below half as she loaded a fresh magazine. The M110's barrel radiated heat that shimmered the air above her position, but the weapon's accuracy remained consistent. 2 pickup trucks appeared on the compound's northern approach, their headlights illuminating the battlefield as 8 additional fighters dismounted with fresh weapons and full ammunition loads. The reinforcements spread out with tactical discipline, immediately directing fire toward the squad's position with renewed intensity. Caldwell's people went flat behind their inadequate cover as rounds impacted all around them. Chun adjusted her mental count upward. 17 active hostiles now. The situation deteriorating as enemy numbers increased while her ammunition decreased. She targeted the lead truck's driver through the windshield, her round passing through glass and skull in the same instant. The vehicle swerved wildly without guidance, its momentum carrying it into the compound wall, where it crumpled against stone with a shriek of tearing metal. The crash created momentary chaos among the reinforcements as fighters scattered from the impact zone. Chun exploited their confusion with rapid engagement, dropping 4 men while they remained focused on the destroyed truck instead of seeking cover. Her rifle's bolt locked back empty, the magazine exhausted, and she performed a speed reload that took 2.3 seconds before resuming fire. Caldwell's voice transmitted through the static, calm despite the desperate circumstances. Dragon 6. Overwatch has maintained defensive perimeter for 13 minutes against superior numbers. 2 wounded, both stable. Squad remains combat effective due to precision Overwatch support. Request immediate quick reaction force. His report carried the weight of a man who understood that survival depended entirely on the woman 800 meters away, who nobody had expected to fire a shot. Chun conducted a tactical reload, her fingers automatically counting the remaining magazines secured to her vest. 3 full, 1 partial, 42 rounds total against 17 confirmed hostiles still capable of fighting. The mathematics of sustained combat pressed against her consciousness as she resumed her scope scan of the compound perimeter. The hostile commander's voice carried across the battlefield in Arabic, his orders sharp with frustration as he directed his remaining fighters to coordinate their assault. Chun didn't speak the language, but tactical intent translated clearly through observed movement. 3 teams forming up, each with 4 to 5 fighters, preparing a synchronized push against the squad's weakened position. A machine gunner established position behind rubble on the compound's eastern edge, his PKM's barrel already tracking toward where Caldwell's medic worked frantically on Torres's wounded leg. Chen's crosshairs settled on the gunner's head, her trigger press smooth despite the adrenaline, now 17 minutes into her system. The round impact snapped his skull sideways, the machine gun falling silent before its first burst. The Eastern Assault Team faltered as their support weapon disappeared, their advance stalling in the kill zone Chen controlled. She shifted to the Western Team, dropping their point man as he vaulted a low wall. The second man hesitated, fatal indecision that gave Chun time to work the bolt and fire again. 2 bodies now blocked the western approach, the surviving fighters scrambling backward into cover. Caldwell read the pattern developing across the battlefield, his tactical mind recognizing Chen's priority system. He directed his squad's fire toward the southern approach that Chen couldn't effectively engage from her angle, creating overlapping fields that forced the 3rd Assault Team to ground. The partnership between Ground Element and Overwatch had evolved beyond coordination into something approaching telepathy. A fighter appeared with an RPG, his launcher tracking toward the squad from a 3rd-story balcony Chen hadn't previously identified as occupied. She fired through instinct rather than conscious aim, the round striking the RPG's warhead a microsecond before the man could complete his trigger pull. The explosion consumed the balcony in orange flame, debris raining on fighters below and triggering panicked retreat from 3 positions simultaneously. Chun used the chaos to eliminate targets of opportunity, her shots falling into the mechanical rhythm she'd practiced 10,000 times on competition ranges. Trigger press, follow-throw, work the bolt, acquire next target, breath control, press again. 4 fighters fell in 8 seconds, each kill creating cascading effects as survivors abandoned positions to avoid the invisible precision that punished every exposure. The squad bounded forward during the confusion, Caldwell directing movement while his people maintained suppressive fire. They reached a collapsed section of compound wall that offered better cover and clear sight lines. turning their defensive position into something approaching a strong point. Torres limped between two soldiers, his wounded leg bound but functional enough for movement. Chen's magazine ran dry as she engaged a sniper, attempting to establish position in the water tower's damaged platform. She dropped the empty, seated a fresh magazine, and resumed fire in 3 seconds. The tower sniper never completed his setup, tumbling from height to impact the courtyard stone below. Hostile fire concentrated on Chen's ridge position as the enemy commander finally committed resources to eliminating the threat that had devastated his force. Rounds impacted the rocks around her, throwing stone fragments that stung her face and hands. She rolled left 3 meters, establishing a new firing position before return fire could adjust, and immediately engaged 2 fighters who'd exposed themselves while shooting at her previous location. The M110's barrel glowed faintly in darkness, heat distortion making her scope picture waver at the edges. She adjusted her hold to compensate, maintaining accuracy despite the weapon's thermal stress. A fighter with a radio appeared in a doorway, speaking urgently into his handset, likely calling for additional reinforcements. Chen's round destroyed both radio and the man holding it. Vickers transmitted another demand for situation report, his voice carrying the edge of an officer who'd lost control hours ago and couldn't regain it. Chun muted her radio entirely, the distraction more dangerous than any hostile fire. Her world contracted to the scope's circular view, the rifle's controls, and the tactical geometry that kept 12 men alive against overwhelming force. The squad's medic finished treating Torres and moved to Mendez, whose initial screaming had subsided into morphine-dulled moans. Chun watched through her scope as the medic worked, calculating angles that would protect the exposed medical treatment from hostile fire. When a rifleman attempted to target them from an upper window, she eliminated him before his first shot. 2 fighters attempted to reach the crashed pickup truck, perhaps seeking mounted weapons or additional ammunition stored in its bed. Chun dropped both mid-sprint, their bodies falling within meters of each other. The truck's wreckage became an impromptu barrier, hostile fighters now avoiding the area entirely after watching 2 men die trying to reach it. Chen's ammunition count dropped to 28 rounds as she loaded what would likely be her final magazine before transitioning to the M4. The hostile force had diminished to perhaps 11 active shooters, their fire sporadic and poorly coordinated, but they still possessed numerical advantage and defensive positions. She prioritized targets that posed immediate threat to the squad, letting other shooters live if they remained suppressed behind cover. A fighter broke from cover in panicked flight, abandoning his weapon and sprinting toward the tree line beyond the compound. Chun let him go, conserving ammunition for threats rather than routing soldiers. 2 more fighters followed their comrades' example, the hostile force's cohesion fracturing under sustained precision fire that seemed to predict every exposure. Caldwell consolidated his squad's position, establishing interlocking fields of fire that transformed their corner of the battlefield into a fortress. His radio transmission came through on the emergency channel Chun had left active. Overwatch, marking targets with IR laser. 2 positions on northern wall need immediate attention. The invisible infrared beam appeared in Chen's night vision, painting doorways where hostile fire originated. She engaged both marked positions in sequence, her shots eliminating threats Caldwell had identified as critical. The partnership's efficiency had evolved to the point where words became unnecessary, tactical need communicated through laser designation and precision response. The squad's defensive fire decreased as hostile threats diminished, ammunition conservation replacing desperate suppression. Chen's scope tracked across the compound in methodical pattern, searching for movement among shadows and rubble. 3 fighters remained visible, their positions defensive rather than aggressive. Survivors focused on avoiding the sniper who'd killed 18 of their comrades. She held fire, letting them maintain their static positions rather than force movement that would require additional ammunition. The battlefield settled into an uneasy quiet broken only by occasional sporadic fire, and the crackling flames of the burning Humvee. Chen's hands trembled slightly as adrenaline began converting to fatigue. 19 minutes of sustained combat, taking physiological toll. She forced her breathing into the controlled pattern that steadied her aim, maintaining her vigil over the squad that had dismissed her as unnecessary babysitter duty just 1 hour earlier. Major Holland leaned forward in his chair at the Battalion Tactical Operations Center, his eyes fixed on the monitor displaying thermal imagery from a Predator drone circling 8,000 feet above the firefight. The screen showed heat signatures scattered across the compound in patterns that told a story of catastrophic ambush and desperate defense. "Get me audio on that net," Holland said to the communications officer seated 2 stations away. "I want to hear what's happening down there." The officer's fingers worked across his console, routing radio traffic through the TOC's speaker system. Vickers's panicked voice filled the room, ordering immediate withdrawal, while Caldwell's calmer tones requested fire support that wasn't available. The thermal feed showed one isolated signature on the ridgeline 800 meters from the main engagement, a single soldier in a position that tactical doctrine identified as Overwatch. Holland watched that signature remain motionless for long seconds before muzzle flash bloomed white-hot in infrared, then another flash, then a third in rapid succession. On the compound side of the screen, hostile signatures dropped and disappeared with mechanical precision. "Who's on that ridge?" Holland asked, his question directed at the intelligence officer reviewing the mission roster on a separate terminal. The captain scrolled through deployment data, cross-referencing call signs with personnel files. "Staff Sergeant Maya Chan, sir. Designated Overwatch for Operation Sandstone." The captain pulled Chen's service record onto the main display, her photograph appearing alongside qualification scores and deployment history. Expert marksman badge, competitive shooting background, spotless service record. No combat decorations listed, though her file showed 3 previous deployments in support roles. Holland studied the thermal feed as Chen's position flashed again, another hostile signature disappearing from the compound's defensive positions. The drone's computer overlay tracked targets eliminated, the count climbing past 12 while Holland watched. "Support role," he said quietly, his tone suggesting the classification might require revision. The communications officer adjusted frequencies, isolating Chen's call sign from the general radio traffic. Her voice came through calm and professional, reporting target engagements with the detached precision of a training exercise rather than a firefight that had already lasted 16 minutes. Hostile reinforcements arriving from the north, 2 vehicles with approximately 8 personnel. Engaging. The thermal display showed pickup trucks entering the compound's perimeter, their heat signatures distinct against cooler background. Chen's muzzle flash appeared once. Then the lead vehicle swerved wildly and impacted the compound wall. Holland watched as multiple hostile signatures scattered from the crash site, for disappearing in rapid sequence as Chun engaged targets of opportunity. "Sir," the intelligence captain said, pulling additional data onto his screen. Drone footage shows Staff Sergeant Chun has maintained continuous precision fire for 17 minutes. Current count shows 18 enemy Kia directly attributable to her position. The squad would have been overrun without her intervention. Holland reached for his radio handset, keying the command frequency. "Dragon 6, this is Warhorse 6. Authenticate your current situation." Vickers's response came through broken and uncertain, his report contradicting the objective evidence displayed across every monitor in the TOC. Holland cut him off mid-sentence. "Overwatch, this is Warhorse 6. Continue your mission. Quick Reaction Force is inbound. ETA 16 minutes. Chen's acknowledgement was brief, her attention clearly focused on the scope rather than radio protocol. Holland appreciated the priority system, recognizing a soldier who understood that conversation could wait until after survival was secured. He turned to his operations officer, a lieutenant colonel who'd been watching the drone feed with growing appreciation. "Give me Captain Marshall's QRF airborne immediately," Holland ordered. "2 Blackhawks, full loadout. Tell him the situation is critical and his approach will be hot." The operations officer lifted his radio, relaying commands that would mobilize 20 additional soldiers and transform the tactical picture on the ground. The thermal display showed hostile forces attempting a coordinated assault on 3 axes, their movement suggesting professional training and tactical discipline. Holland watched Chen's position flash repeatedly as she engaged the Eastern team, each shot eliminating a threat that would have overwhelmed Caldwell's defensive position. The Western and Southern teams faltered as their supporting fires disappeared, tactical coordination collapsing under precision that seemed to anticipate every exposure. "She's prioritizing by threat level," the intelligence captain observed, his analysis matching Holland's own assessment. Eastern team had the angle on their wounded. "She's protecting the medic." The captain highlighted positions on his tactical display, showing how Chen's target selection created overlapping defensive zones that kept the squad alive despite their inadequate cover. Holland pulled up Chen's qualification scores, reviewing marksmanship data that suddenly carried combat relevance. Maximum scores across every category, competition medals from regional and national events, instructor certifications that indicated teaching-level expertise. Her deployment history showed she'd volunteered for forward positions repeatedly, assignments that headquarters had classified as low risk based on their distance from primary engagement zones. "Low risk," Holland said to himself, watching Chen eliminate 2 more hostiles who'd attempted to flank her position. "We've been wasting her on radio watch and supply convoy security." His words carried the weight of institutional failure, recognition that talent had been consistently misapplied through assumptions about appropriate roles. The drone feed showed hostile fire concentrating on Chen's ridge as the enemy commander finally directed resources toward eliminating the threat that had devastated his force. Rounds impacted around her position, thermal blooms showing bullet strikes against rock. Chen's signature rolled laterally, establishing a new firing position, and immediately engaged 2 fighters who'd exposed themselves while targeting her previous location. "She's tactical," the operations officer said with evident respect. "Not just a shooter. She understands maneuver." Holland nodded, recognizing the distinction between marksmanship and combat effectiveness. Chen wasn't simply hitting targets. She was controlling the entire battlefield through systematic target prioritization and position management. Marshall's voice came through the radio net, confirming his QRF was airborne and inbound. Holland updated him on the tactical situation, emphasizing that the Overwatch position had single-handedly prevented squad annihilation. Marshall's response suggested he understood the significance. His approach plan incorporating Chen's position as a friendly asset rather than just another element to extract. The thermal display showed the hostile assault losing momentum as casualties mounted beyond sustainable levels. Fighters abandoned positions, some fleeing toward the tree line, while others retreated into the compound's interior rooms. Holland counted 11 remaining signatures that appeared combat effective, down from the 29 that had initiated the ambush. Caldwell's voice transmitted a situation report, his words carrying the controlled tension of a man who'd accepted death and found unexpected reprieve. 2 wounded stable, defensive positions secured, ammunition at 40%. Overwatch has maintained our perimeter for 19 minutes against superior force. His report included no mention of Vickers, Holland noting the omission with professional interest. The communications officer highlighted a separate frequency where Vickers was attempting to file his own report, his version of events emphasizing tactical decisions that bore no relationship to the objective evidence displayed across the TOC's monitors. Holland listened for 30 seconds before cutting the transmission, his patience for incompetent leadership exhausted by watching a single staff sergeant accomplish what an entire squad and its officer had failed to achieve. "Start documentation," Holland ordered the intelligence captain. "Full drone footage from initial contact through QRF arrival. I want every shot cataloged, every tactical decision recorded. This goes beyond after-action review." The captain understood immediately, beginning the process that would transform combat footage into official record. The thermal display showed Chun maintaining her Overwatch position, her signature motionless except for periodic muzzle flash as she engaged targets that threatened the squad's perimeter. Holland watched her work with the appreciation of an officer who'd spent 30 years distinguishing between soldiers who followed doctrine and warriors who transcended it. The distinction wasn't always visible in peacetime, but combat had a way of revealing capability that paperwork could never capture. Chun ejected her magazine and counted the remaining rounds by feel in darkness, her fingers confirming what her mind already knew. 20 rounds left in the current magazine, 22 in her final spare, 42 total against 11 hostiles still capable of fighting. The mathematics had shifted from comfortable to critical, each shot now carrying weight beyond simple target elimination. The compound had settled into uneasy quiet, hostile fighters maintaining defensive positions rather than attempting further assaults after watching 3 coordinated attacks disintegrate under precision fire. Chen's scope tracked across windows and doorways, searching for movement that would indicate renewed aggression. A fighter shifted position behind rubble on the eastern wall, his shoulder briefly visible before he recognized his exposure and pulled back. Chun held fire, conserving ammunition for clear threats rather than speculative shots. Caldwell's voice came through the radio, calm despite the tactical reality that his squad remained pinned with limited ammunition and 2 wounded soldiers requiring evacuation. Torres needs medical facility within 2 hours. Mendez is stable but deteriorating. Request updated ETA on QRF. His words carried no panic, just professional assessment of worsening circumstances. 14 minutes, Chin replied, having monitored the command frequency conversation between Holland and Captain Marshall. She didn't elaborate, her attention fixed on a thermal signature moving between buildings inside the compound. The fighter emerged carrying what appeared to be a PCAM machine gun, attempting to establish a new support weapon position. Chen's shot dropped him before he completed 3 steps, the machine gun clattering uselessly on stone pavement. The squad's medic worked over Mendez with focused intensity, his hands moving through practiced emergency procedures, while hostile fire occasionally cracked overhead. Chun watched through her scope, calculating angles that would protect the exposed medical treatment. A rifleman appeared in a 3rd-story window with clean sight line to the medic's position. Chun eliminated him with a shot that shattered window frame and skull simultaneously. 2 pickup trucks remained parked at the compound's northern edge, their beds potentially containing additional weapons or ammunition that could shift the tactical balance. Chun engaged both vehicles methodically, her rounds punching through engine blocks to ensure they couldn't be used for hostile reinforcement or escape. Coolant and oil spread across pavement in dark pools that reflected ambient light. Specialist Torres attempted to put weight on his wounded leg, testing whether he could move under his own power. The tourniquet had stopped bleeding but left him with limited mobility, his movement requiring support from 2 other soldiers. Chun noted the tactical liability, understanding that any extraction would need to account for wounded who couldn't fight or run effectively. A hostile fighter broke cover in desperate sprint toward the tree line, abandoning weapon and position in panic flight. Chun tracked him through her scope but held fire, letting him flee rather than spend ammunition on a routing soldier who no longer posed threat. 2 more fighters followed minutes later, the hostile forces' cohesion fragmenting as survivors recognized that remaining meant death from invisible precision. The compound's return fire had diminished to occasional sporadic bursts from perhaps 6 positions, fighters maintaining static defense rather than aggressive action. Chun counted remaining ammunition against remaining threats, her mental calculations suggesting she could maintain overwatch through QRF arrival if hostile forces didn't receive reinforcement or reorganize for another coordinated assault. Caldwell repositioned his squad to tighter defensive formation, consolidating fields of fire and reducing their perimeter to something 8 effective soldiers could actually defend. His tactical adjustments showed professional competence, maximizing the advantages Chin's overwatch had created. When fighters attempted to exploit perceived gaps in the squad's coverage, They discovered Chen's scope already tracking their approach. The M110's barrel had cooled slightly during the brief lull in engagement, though heat shimmers still distorted Chen's scope picture at maximum magnification. She adjusted her hold to compensate, maintaining accuracy despite the weapon's thermal stress. A fighter attempted to recover the RPG that had fallen in the courtyard during earlier fighting, apparently believing the valuable weapon worth the exposure risk. Chen's round convinced him otherwise, his body collapsing across the launcher he died trying to reach. Torres cried out as the medic adjusted his tourniquet, the sound carrying across the battlefield with unfortunate clarity. Hostile fire immediately concentrated on the noise, rounds impacting around the squad's position as fighters attempted to capitalize on revealed location. Chun engaged 3 separate positions in rapid sequence, her shots eliminating the immediate threat and forcing remaining hostiles back into defensive cover. She loaded her final magazine as her current one ran dry, the mechanical action of magazine change now carrying significance beyond simple reloading. 22 rounds remaining, 11 confirmed hostiles, the ratio tight enough that any wasted shots could prove catastrophic. Chen's breathing settled into the controlled pattern that steadied her aim, fatigue pressing against consciousness after 23 minutes of sustained combat. A fighter with binoculars appeared on the compound's roof, attempting to spot Chen's position through systematic scanning. She eliminated him before his lenses could sweep across her hide sight, the body tumbling from the roofline to impact the courtyard below. The binoculars shattered on stone, their lenses reflecting moonlight in fragments. Caldwell transmitted tactical update to Holland's command frequency, his report detailing ammunition status and casualty condition with professional precision. His words included implicit trust that Chun would maintain overwatch until relief arrived, confidence earned through 23 minutes of watching her eliminate every threat that emerged. The partnership between ground element and Overwatch had evolved beyond tactical coordination into something approaching absolute faith. Chen's scope tracked methodically across the compound in search pattern that covered every potential firing position. Movement flickered in a basement window, partially concealed by shadow and debris. She watched for 17 seconds until the fighter shifted position and exposed his profile. Her shot passed through the narrow window opening and eliminated the threat, demonstrating patience that separated expert marksmen from merely competent shooters. The tactical radio crackled with distant rotor noise, barely audible over other battlefield sounds, but distinct to ears trained to recognize friendly air support. Chen identified the sound as Black Hawk helicopters still several minutes from visual range, their approach offering promise of relief, but not yet tactical reality. She maintained her focus on immediate threats rather than future rescue, understanding that survival depended on the next 11 minutes before QRF arrival. 2 fighters attempted coordinated movement between buildings, their timing suggesting communication and tactical planning. Chun engaged the lead man first, forcing his partner to abandon the maneuver and retreat to previous cover. The second fighter remained suppressed, his tactical options reduced to static defense or suicidal exposure. Torres requested water through parched lips, his voice carrying the distinctive roughness of shock and blood loss. The medic provided hydration while maintaining pressure on the leg wound, his movements efficient despite working under intermittent hostile fire. Chun watched their position through her scope, ready to engage any threat that targeted the vulnerable medical treatment. The compound's generator continued its monotonous hum throughout the engagement, electrical power maintaining interior lights that backlit windows and created perfect targeting silhouettes. Chun had eliminated 4 fighters who'd failed to recognize how their own illumination betrayed their positions. The generator represented tactical liability the hostile force apparently couldn't afford to silence, their need for light outweighing its cost in exposed positions. She counted 14 minutes remaining until QRF arrival, her ammunition sufficient to maintain defensive fire if hostile forces remained suppressed. The tactical geometry had shifted from desperate defense to controlled waiting, Chen's precision having purchased time that would hopefully convert to survival once Marshall's additional soldiers arrived to break the stalemate. Chen's finger rested against the M110's trigger guard as she counted her remaining ammunition one final time. 20 rounds in the magazine, 0 spares, 11 confirmed hostiles still defending positions throughout the compound. The arithmetic had compressed to its most brutal simplicity, every shot now carrying consequences that extended beyond individual target elimination to the squad's collective survival. A fighter shifted position behind a concrete barrier on the compound's southern wall, his movement pattern suggesting preparation for action rather than static defense. Chen tracked him through her scope as he gestured to 2 other fighters, their coordination indicating renewed tactical planning. She held fire, waiting to see their intention before committing precious ammunition to speculative engagement. The 3 fighters moved simultaneously, rushing from separate positions toward the compound's eastern exit in what appeared to be escape attempt rather than assault. Chun engaged the lead runner, her shot dropping him mid-stride. The 2 trailing fighters immediately reversed direction and scrambled back to cover, their withdrawal confirming Chen's assessment that hostile morale had fractured beyond effective combat capability. Caldwell's squad maintained defensive positions behind the destroyed Humvee and collapsed wall section, their ammunition conservation evident in the decreased volume of return fire. Only when hostile fighters exposed clear threats did the squad engage, each shot now representing tactical calculation rather than suppressive volume. The partnership between Ground Element and Overwatch had evolved to include shared understanding of resource limitations and prioritized target engagement. Torres lay against the Humvee's wreckage with eyes closed, his breathing shallow but steady under the medic's continued monitoring. Mendez had lapsed into unconsciousness despite the medic's efforts, his vital signs weak enough to transform medical evacuation from urgent to critical. Chun watched their position through her scope, calculating that any hostile assault on the squad's location would force her to expend her final ammunition defending soldiers who couldn't defend themselves. The rotor noise grew louder, distinctive Blackhawk turbines now audible without electronic amplification. Chun estimated 8 minutes until visual contact, perhaps 10 until the helicopters reached effective engagement range. The tactical picture had compressed to whether her 20 rounds could maintain defensive perimeter through those final minutes against enemies who might recognize their last opportunity to inflict casualties before overwhelming force arrived. 2 fighters appeared on the compound's roof, both carrying AK-47s and moving with the desperate urgency of soldiers who understood their tactical window was closing. They established positions that offered clear angles on the squad's location, their weapons already tracking toward targets. Chun eliminated both with shots separated by 2.1 seconds, her precision unchanged despite fatigue and dwindling ammunition. 18 rounds remaining. A hostile machine gunner attempted to reclaim the PCAM position that Chun had denied them throughout the engagement, dragging the heavy weapon toward rubble that would provide protected firing position. She waited until he'd committed to the movement before engaging, her round striking him center mass and ending the attempt. The PCAM remained abandoned, too exposed for any other fighter to risk retrieval. 17 rounds remaining. Caldwell transmitted updated casualty status to the command frequency, his words clinical despite describing 2 soldiers whose survival now depended on rapid medical intervention. His report included no requests, just information that allowed higher command to prepare appropriate response. Chun appreciated the professional detachment, recognizing a squad leader who understood that emotion was luxury combat couldn't afford. 3 fighters emerged from the compound's northern door in rapid succession, their movements suggesting coordinated assault rather than panicked flight. Chun engaged the point man, forcing the 2 trailing fighters to ground before they could establish momentum. They returned fire toward her position, their shots impacting rocks 15 meters from her actual location. She used their muzzle flashes to identify precise positions and eliminated both with aimed shots that demonstrated why guessing at sniper locations proved fatal. 14 rounds remaining. The Blackhawks appeared as dark silhouettes against lighter sky, their approach now visible to everyone on the battlefield. The helicopter's arrival triggered immediate response from hostile forces, fighters abandoning defensive positions in final desperate flight toward tree lines and drainage systems that might offer escape from overwhelming firepower. Chun tracked 3 fighters sprinting from the compound but held fire, recognizing they no longer posed threat to Caldwell's squad. 2 fighters remained in defensive positions, apparently choosing last stand over surrender or flight. One occupied a reinforced doorway that offered excellent cover and clear sight lines to the squad's location. The other had established position in a basement window that provided protected firing angle. Both represented legitimate threats that would require elimination before QRF could safely extract the wounded. Chun engaged the doorway position first, her round passing through the narrow opening to eliminate the fighter who'd believe his cover was sufficient. The basement position proved more difficult, its limited exposure requiring patience she might not have time to exercise. She watched for 23 seconds until the fighter adjusted his position to track the approaching helicopters, his movement creating brief exposure. Her shot ended the wait. 12 rounds remaining against 0 confirmed threats. The Blackhawks swept over the compound with door gunners engaging scattered hostiles who'd failed to escape the kill zone. Their minigun fire shredded defensive positions and eliminated any remaining organized resistance in seconds of concentrated violence that transformed the tactical picture from contested engagement to absolute dominance. Chun watched through her scope as 20 fresh soldiers fast-stroked from the helicopters into the compound, their overwhelming force collapsing hostile resistance that had endured for 27 minutes against precision overwatch. Captain Marshall's voice came through the radio net, calling for Chun to report to the compound for immediate debrief. His tone carried respect absent from Vickers's earlier dismissal. The difference between an officer who'd watched combat unfold through drone feed and one who'd assigned her to babysitter duty without understanding her capability. Chun saved her weapon and began the descent from Ridge 347, her legs trembling slightly as adrenaline converted to fatigue after sustained combat that had tested every skill competition shooting had developed. The M110's barrel remained hot against her gloved hand, heat's signature of 27 minutes that had transformed dismissed Overwatch into the difference between squad annihilation and survival. The compound grew larger as she approached, its walls scarred by impacts, and its courtyard littered with evidence of the engagement Chun had controlled from 800 meters distance. QRF soldiers moved through the area with tactical efficiency, securing positions and treating casualties with professional speed. She recognized several bodies scattered throughout the compound, fighters she'd eliminated during various phases of the battle. Caldwell stood beside the destroyed Humvee as medics loaded Torres and Mendez onto stretchers for helicopter evacuation. He watched Chun approach, his expression carrying weight that words would struggle to convey. His hand moved in brief acknowledgement, the gesture containing more meaning than elaborate speech could provide. Chun nodded once in return, the exchange sufficient between soldiers who'd partnered through combat that doctrine never anticipated. Marshall waited near the compound's eastern entrance, surrounded by his officers who deployed with the QRF. His tactical gear showed fresh deployment, contrast to Caldwell's squad, whose equipment bore the marks of sustained contact. Marshall's eyes tracked Chun as she crossed the courtyard, his assessment clinical and professional. Staff Sergeant Chun, Marshall said as she reached his position. His words carried formal recognition that the situation demanded official documentation rather than casual conversation. I need your immediate after-action report. Command is waiting for details on what happened here. His emphasis on the word command suggested that interest extended beyond battalion level to authorities whose attention rarely focused on individual soldiers. Chun began her report with the tactical precision her shooting had demonstrated, describing the engagement in chronological sequence without embellishment or interpretation. Marshall's intelligence officer recorded every detail while other officers cross-referenced her account against drone footage and radio logs. The correlation between Chen's description and objective documentation would later prove exact. Her recall matching video evidence with accuracy that suggested eidetic memory or exceptional tactical awareness. Marshall's intelligence officer moved through the compound with methodical precision, marking each body with number tags while cross-referencing positions against Chen's after-action report. The process took 40 minutes as QRF soldiers secured the perimeter and established defensive positions that transformed the ambush site into controlled investigation area. 18 confirmed enemy killed in action, the intelligence officer reported, his voice carrying the clinical detachment of a man documenting statistics rather than death. Ballistic evidence indicates all except 3 were eliminated by precision rifle fire from elevated position consistent with Staff Sergeant Chen's Overwatch location. The 3 exceptions show combat rifle characteristics, matching him for engagement at close range. Marshall stood at the compound's center, his tactical display showing the battlefield layout with each casualty marked by GPS coordinates. His S2 intelligence specialist had overlaid thermal drone footage with the casualty positions, creating a comprehensive picture of how the engagement had unfolded. Every marked position showed direct line of sight to Ridge 347, confirming that Chen had controlled the entire battlefield from a single firing position 800 meters distant. The thermal footage reveals sustained engagement pattern. The S2 officer continued, manipulating his tablet to show Chen's muzzle flash signature appearing repeatedly across 27 minutes. Target prioritization demonstrates advanced tactical awareness. She consistently engaged the most dangerous threats first, allowing lesser threats to remain suppressed rather than expending ammunition on secondary targets. Marshall examined Chen's abandoned firing position on the ridge, counting 62 spent casings scattered among the rocks. The brass told its own story, each casing representing a decision made under combat stress, with consequences measured in lives saved or lost. He photographed the position from multiple angles, documenting the tactical geometry that had allowed one soldier to dominate an entire battlefield. Staff Sergeant Chen's weapon show's barrel were consistent with sustained rapid fire. Marshall's armor reported after inspecting the M110. Temperature stress and carbon fouling indicate she maintained continuous engagement without allowing the weapon to cool. The accuracy she achieved under these conditions exceeds standard expectations for the platform. Marshall descended the ridge and approached where Caldwell supervised his squad's preparation for extraction. The sergeant's face showed the distinctive exhaustion of combat survived rather than combat won, his eyes carrying the weight of soldiers who'd faced annihilation and found unexpected deliverance. Sergeant Caldwell, Marshall said, his tone formal enough to indicate official documentation rather than casual conversation. I need your assessment of Staff Sergeant Chen's performance during the engagement. Your testimony will form part of the after-action report that goes to brigade and potentially higher. Caldwell glanced toward where Chen stood, reviewing her weapon with the armorer, her movements showing the same methodical precision she'd applied to everything Marshall had observed. She saved our lives, Caldwell said simply. The ambush was perfect. We were dead the moment that IED detonated. Zero cover, wounded in the open, machine gun fire from elevated positions we couldn't effectively engage. His words carried the absolute certainty of a soldier who'd calculated his own death and found the mathematics irrefutable. He continued without prompting, his report flowing with the clarity of events burned into memory through survival. Chen engaged immediately without waiting for orders. First shot eliminated the PKM gunner who had clean sight line on our position. Second and third shots took out an RPG team that would have finished us. She worked systematically through every threat, prioritizing by danger level rather than target availability. His hand gestured toward the compound's eastern wall, where multiple bodies lay marked with evidence tags. When they sent a hunter team to eliminate her position, Marshall prompted, having reviewed the drone footage showing hostile fighters attempting to flank Chen's ridge. "She killed all three," Caldwell replied. "Maintained overwatch on our position while simultaneously defending against close assault on her own location. Transitioned from precision rifle to carbine. Eliminated the immediate threat, then returned to overwatch without missing a beat." His voice carried professional appreciation for tactical flexibility demonstrated under maximum pressure. Marshall's operations officer approached with a tablet showing compiled timeline data. "Sir, we've correlated radio logs with drone footage and casualty documentation." Staff Sergeant Chun maintained defensive fire for 27 continuous minutes against numerically superior force. Her target prioritization prevented squad annihilation during the initial ambush, then held defensive perimeter through 3 separate assault attempts and 1 vehicle-mounted reinforcement. The officer highlighted specific moments on the timeline where Chen's intervention had proved decisive. Here at minute 4, she eliminated a machine gunner targeting the medic treating casualties. Minute 9, she destroyed an RPG team preparing to engage the squad's position. Minute 17, she engaged hostile reinforcements arriving in vehicles, eliminating the lead driver and causing a crash that disrupted their tactical coordination. Marshall absorbed the information while watching his medics prepare Torres and Mendez for helicopter evacuation. Both wounded soldiers were conscious now, stabilized enough for transport to the field hospital where surgical teams waited. Their survival represented Chen's most significant achievement, her precision fire having purchased time for medical treatment that would have been impossible under sustained hostile assault. "Captain Marshall," Chen approached with her weapon secured and equipment prepared for extraction. Her face showed fatigue, but her movements remained controlled, discipline overriding the physiological crash that followed extended combat. "I need to retrieve my spent casings from the firing position before we extract. Accountability for ammunition expenditure." Marshall almost laughed at the concern, the mundane administrative requirement seeming absurd after what he'd just documented. "Leave them, Staff Sergeant. I've already photographed the position. Those casings are evidence for the after-action report, not accountability shortfalls." His words carried implicit message that Chen's performance had transcended normal administrative concerns. Holland's voice crackled through Marshall's radio, requesting immediate, secure communication. Marshall moved to the QRF command vehicle, where encrypted communications equipment allowed private conversation with the battalion commander. Holland's first question addressed Chen's condition and availability for immediate transport to battalion headquarters. "She's physically capable," Marshall replied. "Fatigued, but functional. No injuries. Her weapon shows significant wear, but she maintained it throughout the engagement." His report included professional assessment that Chen's mental state remained solid despite the intensity of her first sustained combat action. "Get her back here within the hour," Holland ordered. "I'm initiating paperwork for Silver Star citation based on your preliminary report and the drone documentation. Brigade commander is already aware and wants personal debrief." Marshall acknowledged the order while recognizing its implications. Silver Star recommendations typically required months of investigation and witness testimony, not hours. The compound had transformed from battlefield to investigation site, QRF soldiers systematically documenting every aspect of the engagement for the formal inquiry that would follow. Marshall watched Chen conducting her own weapon maintenance with the same methodical attention she'd applied to target engagement, her focus absolute regardless of whether the task involved life-or-death shooting or routine equipment care. Caldwell approached Chen as his squad prepared to load onto the extraction helicopters. His words were brief and quiet, inaudible to Marshall, but clearly significant based on Chen's response. She nodded once, her expression showing the understated acknowledgement that soldiers used when elaborate gratitude would cheapen what had passed between them. The Blackhawks lifted from the compound in sequence, first carrying Torres and Mendez toward medical care, then Caldwell's squad toward the rear area where they'd undergo their own debriefing. Marshall's helicopter was last, carrying Chun and the documentation that would transform 27 minutes of combat into official record. Chun sat silent during the flight, her eyes tracking across the landscape below while her hands rested on a rifle. Marshall recognized the expression, having seen it on other soldiers after their first sustained engagement. The combination of processing what had occurred and recognizing that survival changed nothing about tomorrow's mission requirements. Combat revealed capability, but the revelation didn't exempt anyone from continued service. Battalion headquarters appeared ahead, its lights marking the administrative center where Chen's performance would convert from tactical action into bureaucratic documentation. Marshall reviewed his notes one final time, ensuring his report captured not just what Chun had accomplished, but the tactical sophistication that separated her achievement from lucky shooting. The evidence was overwhelming, the documentation irrefutable, but Marshall understood that exceptional performance often triggered institutional skepticism, requiring even more thorough proof. The helicopter touched down as Holland emerged from the Tactical Operations Center, his presence indicating command-level interest that extended beyond routine after-action review. Chun gathered her equipment and stepped onto the landing zone, her bearing professional despite the fatigue that must have been pressing against consciousness after the longest 27 minutes of her military career. The battalion briefing room smelled of fresh coffee and tension as Holland arranged his presentation materials across the conference table. Lieutenant Vickers sat in the front row, his uniform showing none of the dust and stress that marked soldiers who'd actually participated in Operation Sandstone's execution. Behind him, Marshall and 3 other company commanders filled seats, their presence indicating this briefing carried significance beyond routine after-action review. Holland keyed the projection system, drone footage appearing on the screen with timestamp and GPS coordinates marking each frame. The thermal imagery showed the compound at the moment of initial contact, heat signatures scattered in patterns that revealed the ambush's sophistication. Hostile forces positioned in 17 separate locations, Holland narrated, his voice clinical. Interlocking fields of fire creating 3 distinct kill zones covering all approach vectors. The tactical setup demonstrated professional military training. The video advanced to show the IED detonation, white-hot thermal bloom consuming Mendez's position before the feed's automatic brightness compensation could adjust. Hostile fire erupted from every marked position simultaneously, their coordination suggesting rehearsed execution rather than reactive defense. The squad's heat signatures scattered in desperate search for cover that didn't exist. Holland paused the footage. At this point, Lieutenant Vickers issued withdrawal order. The room's silence carried weight as the timestamp showed the order came 43 seconds after initial contact, before any assessment of tactical options or enemy strength. Holland didn't elaborate, allowing the timeline to speak for itself. The video resumed, showing Chen's ridge position through enhanced thermal imaging. Her muzzle flash bloomed in infrared as the PKM gunner's signature disappeared from the roofline. 3 more flashes in rapid sequence. 3 more hostile signatures eliminated. Holland advanced through the footage methodically, marking each of Chen's engagements with annotation that specified target, range, and tactical impact. 18 enemy killed in action directly attributable to Staff Sergeant Chen's precision fire, Holland stated. The numbers appeared on screen beside Chen's firing position. 27 minutes of sustained engagement. 0 friendly killed in action. 2 wounded, both stable due to Chen's suppressive fire, allowing medical treatment under combat conditions. Vickers shifted in his seat, his discomfort visible to everyone present. Holland continued without acknowledgement, advancing the footage to show the Hunter team attempting to flank Chen's position. The thermal display captured her transition from overwatch to close defense, 3 hostile signatures disappearing in rapid sequence before she resumed long-range engagement without interruption. Staff Sergeant Chen demonstrated exceptional tactical awareness. Marshall added from his seat, his testimony carrying the authority of the officer who'd conducted ground investigation. She prioritized targets by threat level, conserved ammunition through disciplined fire control, and simultaneously defended her own position while maintaining Overwatch responsibility. Her performance exceeded standard expectations for her rank and experience level. Holland played audio recordings from the radio net. Vickers's panicked orders contrasting sharply with Caldwell's professional situation reports and Chen's calm target engagement calls. The sequence demonstrated command failure with uncomfortable clarity, each transmission revealing an officer who'd lost control of his operation within the first minute of contact. Lieutenant Vickers, Holland said, his tone shifting from narrative to interrogation. Your after-action report claims the mission proceeded according to your tactical plan with only minor complications. Please reconcile that assessment with the objective evidence we've just reviewed. Vickers' attempted response, his words stumbling through justifications that contradicted the video evidence displayed across every monitor in the room. He emphasized his decision to position Chen in Overwatch as critical tactical planning, conveniently omitting his dismissal of that position as unnecessary babysitter duty. His version of events portrayed himself as calm commander executing doctrine, while the footage showed panic and premature withdrawal orders. Holland cut him off mid-sentence, keying audio playback of Vickers's own radio transmissions. The recordings eliminated any possibility of reinterpretation, Vickers's voice capturing his loss of composure with documentary precision. The contrast between his current claims and his actual performance was absolute. Your radio traffic shows you ordered immediate withdrawal 43 seconds after contact, Holland stated. Staff Sergeant Chen ignored that order and maintained defensive fire that saved 12 lives. Had your command been followed, Sergeant Caldwell's entire squad would have been overrun. Vickers had no response, his face showing the recognition that his version of events had collapsed under objective evidence. Marshall provided additional testimony, describing the tactical sophistication Chen had demonstrated through target prioritization and resource management. He detailed specific engagements where her decisions had proved decisive, using drone footage to illustrate how she controlled the entire battlefield from a single position. His professional assessment made clear that Chen's performance wasn't luck or accident, but the application of exceptional skill under maximum pressure. Holland advanced to footage showing hostile reinforcements arriving in pickup trucks, Chen's precision shot creating the vehicle crash that disrupted their tactical coordination. Her subsequent target engagement eliminated 4 fighters while they remained disoriented, turning potential disaster into tactical advantage through split-second decision-making. The briefing room's atmosphere had shifted from routine review to something approaching tribunal as the evidence accumulated. Vickers sat motionless, his earlier confidence replaced by visible awareness that his career trajectory had fundamentally changed. The other company commanders watched with the professional detachment of officers recognizing institutional failure that required correction. Holland concluded the video presentation with footage of QRF arrival and subsequent battlefield investigation. The documented casualty count matched Chen's target engagement reports exactly, 18 confirmed kills corresponding to 18 separate engagements she'd called over the radio net. The correlation between her reports and physical evidence was absolute. Based on this evidence, Holland said, his words carrying formal weight that indicated predetermined decision rather than open discussion, I am immediately removing Lieutenant Vickers from combat leadership and reassigning him to battalion logistics. His tactical decisions endangered his unit, and his command failure nearly resulted in catastrophic casualties. Only Staff Sergeant Chen's initiative and exceptional skill prevented disaster. Vickers attempted protest, but Holland's raised hand cut him off with gesture that brooked no argument. Your command recommendations will undergo formal review. Until that process completes, you are restricted to administrative duties under direct supervision. Dismissed. The finality in Holland's voice made clear that further discussion was neither expected nor welcome. Vickers stood and left the briefing room with the mechanical movements of a man processing career destruction in real time. The door closed behind him, his absence creating space for the conversation that had waited throughout the formal presentation. "Gentlemen," Holland addressed the remaining officers, "I am recommending Staff Sergeant Chen for Silver Star citation. Captain Marshall's investigation and the drone documentation provide irrefutable evidence of extraordinary heroism under fire. Her actions saved 12 lives through sustained precision engagement against numerically superior force." The company commanders nodded acknowledgement, none offering the skepticism that sometimes greeted award recommendations. The evidence was too comprehensive, the documentation too thorough to permit doubt about Chen's achievement. Marshall distributed copies of his formal report, the document detailing every aspect of the engagement with professional precision. "Brigade Commander has already reviewed preliminary footage," Holland continued. "He wants personal debrief with Staff Sergeant Shun within 24 hours. Division may also request testimony, depending on how thoroughly they examine the incident. This becomes case study material regardless of award outcome." Marshall added his own observation about Chen's response to the recognition. "She's more concerned about equipment accountability than commendations," he said. "When I told her to leave the spent casings for documentation, she looked uncomfortable about violating standard procedure." The comment drew quiet appreciation from officers who recognized the mindset that prioritized mission over recognition. Holland pulled up Chen's personnel file, displaying her service record alongside the combat documentation. Expert marksman qualifications, competitive shooting background, 3 deployments in support roles with 0 disciplinary issues. Her file showed consistent excellence in every assigned task, though none of those tasks had previously included sustained combat engagement. "We've been underutilizing her capability," Holland said bluntly. "She's been assigned to convoy security, radio watch, and administrative support because that's where we slot female soldiers with marksmanship skills. The drone footage proves we need to reassess those assignments based on demonstrated capability rather than conventional role assumptions." The institutional implications extended beyond individual recognition to force structure questions about how capability was identified and employed. Chen's performance had revealed gaps in standard assessment methods that relied on peacetime metrics rather than combat potential. The briefing room conversation shifted to broader policy discussions about talent utilization and the distinction between qualification scores and combat effectiveness. Holland closed the briefing with instruction for the company commanders to review their own unit assignments, specifically examining whether qualified personnel were being underemployed due to institutional assumptions rather than actual capability limitations. Chen's achievement had become catalyst for examination of practices that might be wasting talent across the battalion. Holland's office was smaller than its function suggested, walls covered with tactical maps and unit rosters that tracked every soldier under his command. Chun sat in the single chair facing his desk, her uniform clean since the engagement but still showing the creases and wear of field deployment. The major reviewed paperwork with methodical attention before looking up to meet her eyes. "Staff Sergeant Shun," Holland began, his tone carrying formality that indicated official business rather than casual conversation. "I've completed my recommendation for Silver Star citation based on Captain Marshall's investigation and the comprehensive drone documentation. The evidence supporting this award is among the strongest I've encountered in 28 years of service." Chen's expression didn't change, her face maintaining the neutral discipline that had marked every interaction since her extraction from the battlefield. "Thank you, sir," she replied simply, offering no elaboration or false modesty that might have seemed appropriate from soldiers seeking recognition. Holland appreciated the restraint, recognizing a soldier who understood that performance spoke louder than self-promotion. "The citation will detail your actions during Operation Sandstone," he continued. 27 minutes of sustained precision fire against numerically superior force. 18 enemy killed in action. 12 friendly lives saved through initiative that exceeded your assigned mission parameters. He slid a document across the desk, the formal award recommendation showing brigade commander's signature already affixed alongside space, reserved for division approval. The paperwork would proceed through channels with unusual speed, given the comprehensive documentation supporting every claim. Holland had ensured that no administrative delay would diminish recognition Chun had earned through extraordinary performance. You ignored Lieutenant Vickers's withdrawal order, Holland stated, the observation carrying neither approval nor censure, but simple acknowledgement of fact. That decision saved Sergeant Caldwell's squad from annihilation. Tell me what you were thinking when you made that choice. Chun considered the question with the same deliberation she'd applied to target selection during the engagement. The tactical situation showed the squad had no viable withdrawal route under sustained fire, she replied. Movement without suppression would have resulted in additional casualties. Maintaining overwatch provided the only option for establishing defensive perimeter until reinforcement arrived. Her response demonstrated the tactical reasoning that had guided her decisions under fire, each choice driven by analysis rather than emotion or reckless heroism. Holland recognized the distinction, understanding that Chen's achievements stemmed from professional competence applied under extreme pressure rather than dramatic gestures unsupported by sound tactics. Your service record shows 3 previous deployments in support roles, Holland continued. Convoy security, communications, administrative functions. No previous combat decorations or direct engagement experience. How does a soldier with that background develop the capability you demonstrated? Chen's answer came without hesitation. Competitive shooting develops technical skills and stress management, sir. The fundamentals transfer directly to combat application when situations require precision engagement. Target prioritization and resource management are identical whether shooting for score or defending a position under fire. Holland absorbed the explanation while reviewing Chen's competition results documented in her file. Regional and national medals in multiple disciplines, instructor certifications indicating teaching-level expertise, qualification scores that consistently maxed every available category. The credentials suggested capability that standard military assignment practices had failed to utilize effectively. The Army is reassigning you to sniper instructor position at Fort Benning, Holland said, delivering information he'd advocated for during conversations with brigade and division leadership. Your demonstrated expertise needs to be shared with soldiers entering the sniper pipeline. You'll develop curriculum and teach advanced techniques to students who will apply what you know across multiple units. The assignment represented institutional recognition that Chen's value extended beyond individual performance to multiplication through training. Holland had argued that keeping her in conventional unit assignments would waste capability that could influence hundreds of soldiers through proper instruction. Brigade had agreed within hours of reviewing the combat footage. Chun nodded acceptance of the new orders without the enthusiasm or reluctance that might have accompanied career-altering reassignment for other soldiers. The instructor position removes me from combat deployment rotation, she observed, the statement carrying neither disappointment nor relief, but simple recognition of practical reality. Holland had anticipated the concern, understanding that soldiers who'd proven themselves in combat sometimes resented reassignment to training roles. Your expertise saves more lives through proper instruction than through individual deployment, he replied. One soldier maintaining overwatch saves 12 lives. One instructor training 50 snipers per year creates capability that saves hundreds. The mathematics favor the teaching position. The logic was sound, but Holland recognized it might not address whatever personal considerations motivated Chen's service. Some soldiers needed combat to feel fulfilled, while others viewed it as unfortunate necessity. He couldn't determine which category Chen occupied based on her carefully controlled responses. Sergeant Caldwell's squad requested you for their next operation, Holland added. His formal request cited your tactical coordination and their established working relationship. I denied the request because your instructor assignment takes priority, but I wanted you to know that the soldiers you saved want to serve with you again. Chen's expression shifted slightly, the first break in her controlled demeanor since entering the office. The information clearly carried significance beyond its practical implications. "They're exceptional soldiers, sir," she replied. "The coordination we achieved during the engagement reflected their professional competence as much as any skill I contributed." Holland appreciated the deflection while recognizing its inaccuracy. Caldwell's squad was competent, but their survival had depended entirely on Chen's intervention. The major had reviewed every minute of drone footage and understood that professional coordination only mattered because Chen's precision had created time for that coordination to develop. Without her immediate engagement of the PCAM gunner in the first seconds of contact, the squad would have been overrun before any partnership could form. "Your technical skills are exceptional," Holland said, shifting the conversation toward the institutional implications he'd been considering since reviewing Marshall's investigation. "But your tactical awareness is what separates your performance from simple marksmanship. You understood the entire battlefield, prioritized targets by threat level, managed limited ammunition against superior numbers, and simultaneously defended your own position while maintaining overwatch responsibility." He paused to ensure Chun understood the significance of his assessment. "Those capabilities suggest potential beyond instructor roles. The Army has programs for soldiers who demonstrate advanced tactical thinking. Special Operations Recruitment, Officer Candidate School, specialized assignment tracks that utilize unique skill combinations. Your performance qualifies you for consideration across multiple programs." Chen's response came after longer consideration than her previous answers. "I appreciate the options, sir. My current focus is on the instructor assignment and ensuring the training I provide meets the standard soldiers' need for combat effectiveness. Additional opportunities can be evaluated based on how that assignment develops." Holland recognized the diplomatic deflection, a soldier neither rejecting opportunities nor committing to paths she hadn't fully considered. The response showed maturity that matched her tactical competence, understanding that career decisions require deliberation rather than immediate acceptance of flattering offers. "Understood," Holland replied. "The instructor position is confirmed and your orders will be cut within 72 hours. You'll have 2 weeks to process out of this unit and report to Fort Benning, where the sniper school commandant is expecting you. He's already reviewed the combat footage and considers your assignment a significant upgrade to his instructor staff." Chun stood as Holland concluded the meeting, her movements carrying the controlled precision that characterized everything he'd observed about her. "The Silver Star ceremony will occur before your departure," Holland added. "Full battalion formation with brigade commander presiding. Your achievement deserves formal recognition that demonstrates the Army's appreciation for exceptional performance." The major watched Chun leave his office with the same understated professionalism she'd maintained throughout their conversation. Some soldiers thrived on recognition, while others found it uncomfortable regardless of how thoroughly earned. Holland suspected Chun fell into the latter category, a soldier who measured success through mission accomplishment rather than decorations or advancement. He returned to the paperwork covering his desk, processing the administrative requirements that transformed Chen's combat performance into official record and new assignment. The documentation would follow her throughout her career, defining her service through one 27-minute engagement that had revealed capability standard assessment methods had failed to identify. Holland wondered how many other exceptional soldiers were being underutilized because peacetime metrics couldn't predict combat potential, and whether institutional practices would adapt based on lessons Chen's achievement had illustrated. The barracks common area had transformed from the casual space where Vickers had dismissed Chen's role to something approaching shrine as Caldwell's squad gathered for their final evening together before Chen's reassignment. Torres sat with his wounded leg elevated, the bandages fresh from that morning's medical check. Mendez occupied a chair near the window, his recovery slower, but progressing beyond the critical condition that had marked his helicopter evacuation. Chen entered to find the 12-man squad waiting, their arrangement suggesting planned event rather than casual gathering. Caldwell stood near the center of the room, his hands holding a small wooden case that bore the informal craftsmanship of soldiers with too much downtime and access to workshop tools. Staff Sergeant Chun, Caldwell began, his formal tone carrying weight that silenced the room's ambient conversation. This squad exists because you ignored orders and did your job better than anyone had right to expect. His words stated facts without embellishment, the straightforward assessment that soldiers used when gratitude required expression but elaborate speech felt insufficient. He opened the wooden case to reveal a custom patch showing Ridge 347's distinctive profile in silhouette, overlaid with crosshairs and the notation Guardian Actual in block letters. The design was simple, but its meaning unmistakable, transforming Chin's dismissed Overwatch position into call sign that honored her role in their survival. "We had this made by the guy who does unit patches," Caldwell continued. "Figured you earn a call sign that meant something. Guardian 347 was too long, so we shortened it. Guardian Actual works better anyway, since you were the real authority out there regardless of what the radios said." Chun accepted the patch with hands that showed the first visible emotion since entering the barracks. The gesture carried significance beyond its material value, representing acceptance from soldiers who'd initially dismissed her as unnecessary insurance. She studied the design with attention that suggested memorizing details rather than casual observation. "Thank you," Chin said simply, her voice carrying the same controlled professionalism that marked all her interactions. "The call sign is accurate. Overwatch positions control the battlefield when employed correctly." Her response acknowledged their recognition while deflecting personal emphasis toward tactical principle, consistent with her pattern of attributing success to proper execution rather than individual capability. Torres shifted his wounded leg carefully, drawing attention as he prepared to speak. "You put rounds downrange to protect me when I was exposed," he said. "That machine gunner had clean angle on our position. I watched him die through my scope before I even registered the threat." His testimony added specific detail to the general gratitude, identifying moment when Chin's precision had meant the difference between his survival and becoming casualty statistic. Mendez's contribution came quieter, his voice still carrying the roughness of recent medical trauma. "I don't remember most of the fight," he admitted. "Morphine and shock took me out pretty quick after the IED. But Caldwell told me you maintained fire while they dragged me to cover, dropped anyone who tried to target the medic. I'm sitting here because you made it possible for them to treat me under fire." The squad's other members added their own observations, each soldier identifying specific moments when Chin's intervention had proved decisive. Mills described watching 2 fighters die before they could execute flanking maneuver. Rodriguez detailed the RPG elimination that had prevented the squad's complete destruction. Specialist Chin recounted the hunter team that had attempted to eliminate Chin's position, their failure ensuring she could maintain Overwatch throughout the engagement. Chin listened to each testimony with focused attention that suggested she was cataloging their perspectives and comparing them to her own tactical memory of the engagement. When the final soldier finished speaking, she responded with characteristic precision. "The engagement demonstrated proper employment of Overwatch doctrine," Chun said. "Elevated position with clear sight lines, target prioritization by threat level, ammunition discipline, and tactical coordination with ground element. What we accomplished reflected standard procedures executed correctly rather than exceptional individual performance." Caldwell shook his head with expression, suggesting appreciation for Chin's modesty while rejecting its premise. "Standard procedures don't include ignoring withdrawal orders from your commanding officer," he replied. "Standard procedures don't include maintaining precision fire for 27 minutes against superior numbers. Standard procedures especially don't include defending your own position with carbine while simultaneously providing Overwatch support with your primary weapon." The distinction was valid, and Chin acknowledged it with slight nod that conceded Caldwell's point without elaborating further. The conversation shifted to Chin's upcoming instructor assignment at Fort Benning, the squad's questions revealing mixture of curiosity about her future role and disappointment that she wouldn't deploy with them again. "You'll be teaching soldiers who might save our lives someday," Rodriguez observed. "That's multiplication force. One Chun becomes 50 Chins, all of them knowing what you know about controlling a battlefield from Overwatch. The mathematical logic matched Holland's earlier justification, though Rodriguez's version carried personal investment absent from the major strategic reasoning. Mills asked about Chen's competition shooting background, curious how civilian marksmanship translated to combat application. She described the fundamentals of trigger control, breathing discipline, and target acquisition that remained consistent whether shooting for score or defending positions under fire. The technical discussion engaged several squad members who recognized overlap between sports shooting and tactical employment. Torres requested specific details about how Chun had managed a transition between precision rifle and carbine during the close engagement with the hunter team. She walked through the tactical sequence methodically, explaining position selection, weapon transition protocols, and threat prioritization that had allowed her to defend her location while maintaining overall battlefield awareness. The evening progressed through conversation that mixed tactical analysis with personal anecdotes, soldiers processing their shared experience through discussion that helped transform combat trauma into integrated memory. Chun participated with the same controlled engagement she brought to formal briefings, answering questions precisely while avoiding self-promotion that might have seemed natural given the circumstances. Caldwell eventually produced the informal recognition that soldiers created when official channels moved too slowly. He presented Chun with a challenge coin bearing the battalion insignia on one side and custom engraving on the reverse that read Guardian Actual, Operation Sandstone, and the date that would mark the engagement in their collective memory. "This isn't official," Caldwell said. "Command will give you the Silver Star next week in front of the entire battalion. This is from us, the people who were there when it mattered." His distinction between institutional recognition and personal gratitude resonated through the room, soldiers understanding that both forms of appreciation serve different but necessary functions. Chun accepted the coin with visible emotion that cracked her professional composure for the first time since entering the barracks. She studied both sides carefully before responding. "I'll keep this with me," she said. "The coin reminds me why precision matters in training. Every skill I teach translates to real consequences for soldiers in situations like the one we shared." The acknowledgement satisfied the squad's need for Chun to understand the personal significance of her achievement beyond tactical analysis or professional development. They needed her to recognize that she hadn't just executed proper Overwatch doctrine, but had saved 12 specific lives belonging to soldiers who now sat in this room processing gratitude that felt inadequate regardless of how thoroughly expressed. The gathering concluded as evening transitioned toward night, soldiers eventually dispersing to their individual quarters with the understanding that their time together as this specific unit configuration was ending. Chen's reassignment would remove her from their operational element, while Vickers's disgrace had created command vacuum that would be filled by officer they didn't yet know. Chun remained behind as others departed, spending final minutes with Caldwell discussing practical details about her transition to Fort Benning. Their conversation maintained professional focus on logistics and timeline, but underlying current of mutual respect transformed mundane administrative discussion into something approaching farewell between soldiers who'd partnered through combat neither had anticipated. She left the barracks carrying the wooden case with its custom patch and the challenge coin that represented personal recognition from soldiers whose judgment mattered more than any official decoration. The items would accompany her to Fort Benning, where they'd serve as tangible reminders that instructing wasn't abstract preparation, but direct investment in capabilities that determined whether soldiers like Caldwell's squad survived their next engagement. The battalion formation stretched across the parade ground in precise lines. 600 soldiers standing at attention under morning sun that promised heat before the ceremony concluded. Chun stood at parade rest beside the platform where Brigade Commander Colonel Davidson would preside over the Silver Star presentation, her dress uniform showing the creases and polish that military ceremony demanded. Holland approached from the command group, his own uniform decorated with the ribbons that marked 28 years of service across multiple conflicts. Staff Sergeant Shun, he said quietly. The colonel reviewed all documentation personally. He specifically mentioned that the evidence supporting your award exceeded any case he'd encountered in his career. The major's words carried reassurance for a soldier about to receive recognition that might feel uncomfortable regardless of how thoroughly earned. The formation came to attention as Davidson mounted the platform, his presence commanding the parade ground through authority accumulated over decades of leadership. The ceremony's formal structure proceeded through traditional elements, the reading of orders and presentation of colors that preceded individual recognition. Davidson's voice carried across the parade ground as he began reading Chen's citation. The President of the United States takes pleasure in presenting the Silver Star Medal to Staff Sergeant Maya Chun for conspicuous gallantry and intrepid actions in connection with military operations against an armed enemy. His words detailed the engagement with precision that matched the drone documentation, each sentence describing specific actions that had saved 12 lives through sustained precision under fire. On the night in question, Davidson continued, Staff Sergeant Chun maintained defensive overwatch for 27 continuous minutes against numerically superior hostile force. Her precision engagement eliminated 18 enemy combatants while simultaneously defending her own position against flanking assault. Her actions directly prevented the annihilation of a 12-man squad that had been ambushed and pinned in an exposed kill zone with inadequate cover. The citation's language transformed combat into formal recognition. Chen's split-second decisions during the engagement now preserved in official documentation that would define her service record. Davidson described her target prioritization, ammunition management, and tactical coordination with ground forces, each element receiving acknowledgement that elevated performance beyond simple marksmanship to comprehensive battlefield control. Staff Sergeant Chen's extraordinary heroism and selfless devotion to duty are in keeping with the highest traditions of military service and reflect great credit upon herself, her unit, and the United States Army. Davidson concluded the reading and gestured for Chun to approach the platform, where the medal waited in its presentation case. Chun mounted the platform with controlled movements, her bearing professional despite awareness that 600 soldiers watched her receive recognition for an engagement most would never experience. Davidson pinned the silver star to her uniform, the distinctive bronze star with its small silver center now marking her as soldier who demonstrated exceptional valor in combat. The formation erupted in applause as Chun saluted and returned to her position, the sound carrying across the parade ground with volume that suggested genuine appreciation rather than obligatory recognition. Caldwell's squad stood in the front ranks, their applause particularly enthusiastic as they watched the soldier who'd saved their lives receive formal acknowledgement. The ceremony continued through additional awards and unit recognitions, but Chen's Silver Star represented the day's centerpiece based on the citation's length and the brigade commander's personal involvement. When the formation finally dismissed, soldiers approached Chun with congratulations that ranged from formal acknowledgement to personal appreciation from those who understood combat's reality. Torres and Mendez reached her first, both moving under their own power, though Torres still favored his wounded leg. "We're cleared for duty," Torres said. "Full recovery, back on the deployment roster." His words carried implicit gratitude that their wounds had healed rather than becoming permanent disabilities that might have ended their careers. 3 weeks later, Chun stood before her first class at Fort Benning Sniper School, 24 students representing units from across the Army. The classroom walls displayed targets and ballistic charts, technical information that would form foundation for the advanced skills these soldiers had traveled here to develop. "Overwatch isn't babysitter duty," Chun began, her opening statement deliberately echoing the dismissal Vickers had used during the briefing that preceded Operation Sandstone. Properly employed, Overwatch controls entire battlefields through systematic target prioritization and sustained precision engagement. The soldiers who depend on your support trust that you understand the difference between shooting for score and shooting to save lives. She detailed the fundamentals that had guided her performance during the engagement, transforming personal experience into instructional framework that could be replicated by students with different backgrounds and capabilities. Target priority based on threat assessment, ammunition discipline under sustained engagement, position selection for maximum coverage, tactical coordination with ground elements. Each principle received thorough explanation supported by combat examples that demonstrated practical application. The students absorbed her instruction with focused attention that suggested they recognized learning from someone who'd proven concepts under actual combat conditions rather than just training scenarios. Chin's credibility came not from rank or certifications, but from documented performance that had saved 12 lives through exactly the skills she now taught. Her curriculum emphasized the mental aspects of precision shooting under stress, the breathing control and trigger discipline that remained consistent whether facing competition targets or enemy fighters. She described the tactical geometry that allowed single overwatch position to dominate battlefield through systematic coverage of threat vectors, the position management that enabled sustained engagement without becoming vulnerable to counterfire. The afternoon session moved to the range where students would apply morning instruction to practical shooting. Chin supervised their technique with attention to details that separated adequate marksmanship from combat-effective precision. She corrected breathing patterns, adjusted body positions, and refined trigger control with the same methodical focus she'd applied to target engagement during Operation Sandstone. One student asked about the engagement that had earned her Silver Star, curious how competition shooting background had translated to combat application. Chin's response emphasized transferable fundamentals rather than dramatic narrative, describing how skills practiced 10,000 times on civilian ranges had functioned identically when circumstances required defensive fire under pressure. The question prompted discussion about mental preparation for combat shooting, students recognizing that technical skill alone didn't guarantee performance when survival depended on precision. Chin addressed the psychological aspects honestly, acknowledging the stress and fear that accompanied her first sustained engagement, while emphasizing that proper training created automatic responses that functioned despite emotional pressure. As the first training day concluded, Chin reviewed student performance and identified areas requiring additional instruction. The process felt natural despite her limited teaching experience. The same analytical capability that had guided her target prioritization during combat now applied to assessing student development and curriculum adjustment. Months passed as Chin's reputation within the sniper community grew beyond the single engagement that had earned her Silver Star. Her instruction produced measurably improved student performance, graduates applying her techniques during their own deployments and reporting back about successful engagements that validated her methods. The multiplication effect Holland had predicted was materializing, Chin's expertise spreading through the sniper pipeline to influence capabilities across multiple units. Caldwell's squad deployed again under new command, their operation unfolding in different theater against different enemy, but applying lessons learned during Operation Sandstone. Their after-action reports mentioned improved coordination with Overwatch elements, recognition that precision support from elevated positions could control battlefields when properly employed. The institutional learning that had begun with Chin's achievement continued spreading through units that understood Overwatch represented capability rather than unnecessary insurance. Have any of you ever been underestimated? Chun asked her current class during a break between range sessions. Ever had someone dismiss your capability before you demonstrated what you could actually accomplish? The question resonated with several students who recognized the experience from their own careers, capability overlooked because it didn't fit conventional expectations. Chen's story had become teaching tool, illustration that combat revealed potential that peacetime assessment often missed. Her students learned technical skills through her instruction, but they also absorbed the broader lesson that exceptional performance sometimes required ignoring dismissive assumptions and trusting their own preparation when circumstances demanded capability others didn't expect them to possess. The sun set over Fort Benning's ranges as Chun concluded another training day, her 24 students having advanced measurably in their precision shooting development. She secured equipment and reviewed tomorrow's curriculum. The routine tasks of instruction carrying satisfaction that came from meaningful work whose impact extended far beyond individual achievement. The Guardian actual patch remained in her quarters, mounted in frame alongside the challenge Coin Caldwell's squad had presented. The items served as reminders that teaching wasn't abstract preparation, but direct investment in capabilities that determined whether soldiers survived their next engagement. Every skill she taught, every principle she emphasized, every correction she provided translated to real consequences for real soldiers facing real threats in environments where precision meant the difference between mission success and catastrophic failure. Chen's achievement during Operation Sandstone had saved 12 lives through 27 minutes of sustained precision. Her instruction at Fort Benning would ultimately save hundreds through multiplication of capability across soldiers who would carry her techniques into their own combat engagements. The mathematics of impact had shifted from individual performance to institutional influence. One soldier's exceptional capability becoming foundation for systemic improvement that would benefit units she'd never meet fighting battles she'd never witness. The work continued. Students arrived for each new class cycle, and Chen taught them everything she knew about transforming dismissed Overwatch positions into Guardian coverage that controlled battlefields and saved lives. The mission had evolved, but its core purpose remained unchanged. Precision applied for protection of soldiers who depended on capabilities they might never directly see, but would absolutely need when circumstances required someone to maintain vigil from distant ridgelines.